Hi, today we're going to read a little book. It's called Little Miss Giggles. Can you giggle and eat cornflakes at the same time? Little Miss Giggle could. Do you giggle while you sleep? Little Miss Giggle did. Can you giggle while you brush your teeth? Little Miss Giggle could. She was the giggliest girl in the world, and she lived in Chuckle Cottage. But one terrible day last summer, you'll never guess what happened. She lost her giggle. Just like that. Gone. She had woken up giggling, as usual. She had giggled her way down the stairs, as usual. She had giggled while she was having breakfast, as usual. But while she was out walking in the woods around Chuckle Cottage, she realized that she wasn't giggling. She stopped walking. That's odd, she thought. Now, ordinarily, she would have giggled to herself, but not today. She tried to giggle. Nothing happened. She tried again. Nothing happened again. Oh dear, she thought miserably. And as she walked along, a little tear trickled down her cheek. Sad. She met Mr. Happy, who was out for his usual morning stroll. Hello, little Miss Giggles, he laughed. And how are you today? But then he noticed her sad little face. What's wrong? He asked anxiously. You're the happiest person I know. He paused. Next to myself, of course, he had to add hastily. I've lost my giggle, she exclaimed miserably. What? Lost your giggle? He asked befuddled. Mr. Happy scratched his head. He said. Well, we'll just have to find it again, won't we? Little Miss Giggles nodded, but not very hopefully. Come on, he said, taking her by the hand. He took her off to see Mr. Funny. There's nobody like Mr. Funny for a giggle, Mr. Happy said. But it was no use. Mr. Funny tried and tried to get her to giggle, chuckle, or even smile, but Mrs. Giggles just couldn't. Tell you what, said Mr. Funny, I'll tell you my very latest joke. Made it up myself, he added modestly. Very funny. He was laughing so hard he could hardly tell the joke. When he had finished, he and Mr. Happy nearly fell over that they were laughing so much. But not little Miss Giggles. No, it was no use. She sighed. I'm going to be miserable for the rest of my life. I know I am. Then she thought for a moment. And I'll have to change my name, she sobbed. And then she started to cry again. Big, fat tears. Oh dear. Poor Miss Giggles. So Mr. Happy took her to see Mr. Topsy-Turvy to ask his advice. Morning. Good, he said cheerfully. Then he caught sight of little Miss Giggles' sad face. Matter the what's? He asked. He always spoke back to front. Mr. Happy explained what had happened. Dear, oh, Mr. Turvy exclaimed. Then he thought, Doctor, he said, Doctor the sea to take. That's a good idea, said Mr. Happy. and took her right away to see Dr. Make-You-Well. Mr. Happy told the doctor all about little Miss Giggles. He said, "Stick out your tongue." "Not you, you silly Billy," he said to Mr. Happy. Little Miss Giggles stuck out her tongue. "Looks all right to me," said Dr. Make-You-Well. "Open your mouth." Dr. Make-You-Well peered inside. He said again. "You're right. Not a giggle in sight. I'm sorry," he added, "but there's just nothing I can do for you. You'll just have to wait for your giggle to come back." Poor little Miss Giggles. Mr. Happy took her home, and by the time he was not his cheerful self either. What a sorry sight, don't you think? "Why don't you try to giggle?" he said hopefully. Little Miss Giggles opened her mouth. She said unhappily. She said miserably. She added mournfully. It was no use. No use at all. "I'm sorry I can't help," said Mr. Happy, as they reached the garden gate of Chuckle Cottage. And as little Miss Giggles went sadly through her front door, Mr. Happy went home. To think. The idea came to him while he was having lunch. He rubbed his hands with glee. He chortled to himself. And later that afternoon, he knocked on the front door of Chuckle Cottage. "Who's there?" asked a sad little voice. "It's me," called out Mr. Happy. "I have a present for you." Little Miss Giggles looked absolutely miserable, and she opened the door. "Here you are," said Mr. Happy, and he handed her a large box. On the top of the box in a large letter it said, "1 giggle, medium size, this side up, handle with care." Little Miss Giggles looked at the box in amazement. "What is it?" she asked. "What it says it is," laughed Mr. Happy. "You lost your giggle, so I got you another one." "That giggle cost me a lot of money," he added. Little Miss Giggles opened the box. "But there's nothing in it," she exclaimed. "Well, of course not," said Mr. Happy. "Giggles are invisible." "But that's absolutely ridiculous," said little Miss Giggles. "It is," chuckled Mr. Happy. "Of course it is," she giggled. She giggled and she giggled. So little Miss Giggle finally got her giggle back from her friend, Mr. Happy. Hope you guys are doing well. Bye.